Tennessee at Ohio State. This has got to be one of the most talked about college football playoff games that I can remember going into the game. I think that this one being in Ohio at the shoe, ninth game, adds a whole nother element to this huge matchup that everybody is so excited about. At the time we made this graphic, Ohio State was a 7-point favorite. I'm not sure if that has changed any, but I'm thinking that most of these are probably
I
going to stay right around 7.5 is what I'm seeing now. Um,
Yeah, yeah. It's
so
around 7 though. I did update these
over and
graphics,
under is
so
set right around 46.5. Look, Mason, I'll cut right to the chase. Tennessee has had trouble winning games on the road under Josh Heupel. That's something that we talked about earlier this week, and something that I continue to look at and consider whenever trying to predict this game. But that's kind of an intangible thing. That's kind of a thing that's taking place off the field. So I'm just going to set that to this. That is present, and that is an issue, and it has been an issue. Not saying it will be this Saturday, but it has been an issue. And so we'll kind of set that to the side and maybe kind of talk about that later. But this game to me comes down to which team can hit explosive plays offensively. And obviously, either team has running backs that could hit a home run at any moment. They're home run hitters on both sides. Ohio State particularly has two. Tennessee, I would say, has more, just one, Dylan Sampson. But those three guys can take it to the house any given play, right? But that being put aside, I think these offenses are going to have to figure out a way to get the ball over the top of these defenses and hit a couple of big plays. I don't expect this to be a high scoring football game at all. So the team that can hit maybe two of those, I feel like is going to set themselves up really well in this football game. There's other elements here, Mason, that I think are important and stuff that we're going to kind of address here in a second when we bring up some of the comments that we've received on the channel this week talking about this game, such as the weather. That's something that we're going to talk about here in a minute. And I think that weather situation, it depends on how you look at it. I think it applies to both teams, or you could say it's a moot point. We'll kind of get to that in a second. But as far as schematically, Tennessee offense versus Ohio State defense, and flipped. Who has the edge in this game, and what do you think
yeah.
is the keys to victory here? We both know how good these defenses are. They're absolutely outstanding. I think Tennessee has got a little bit deeper defensive line. I think that Ohio State's defense on the back end is a little bit better than Tennessee's, right?
hmm
So what gives here?
Yeah, yeah. I like Tennessee's secondary. I really like Jermod McCoy. I saw him get beat a couple of times against Georgia. It wasn't a lot, but the times that he got beat against Georgia was probably as many times as he had been beaten all season up to that point combined. And so to me, it does kind of make me wonder a little bit about his position going up against noticeably better receivers. I think this will be the best test that these secondary players have had all season long. But I think that the defensive line, to your point, is so deep that it really makes these secondary players look that much better. And I think that that'll continue going up against a beat up Ohio State offensive line. I mean, left tackle out, center out. And I'm kind of wondering if Tennessee is just gonna be all over Will Howard, who is a decent runner. He's not someone who, even though he's a good runner, I don't really see Will Howard as someone who just kind of escapes and flushes out of the pocket a ton and is able to step up when pressure comes and all that. I mean, look, not knocking Will Howard at all. I think he's a fine player. I'm just wondering how disruptive this Tennessee defensive line can be. I really feel confident in that aspect of their game, and we've seen throughout college football all season long that the defensive lines that are the better defensive lines typically win the football game. And to me, as good as Ohio State's defensive line is, and they are good, I think Tennessee's is better. And we saw some comments throughout this week from Ohio State fans saying Tennessee's defensive line is not that good, and their defense isn't as good as Ohio State's, and all this other stuff. I'm here to tell you. I mean, if you watch the games, Tennessee's defensive line is, I think, the best in the country. I mean, as a defensive line alone, they're so deep. They're so good at stopping the run, at getting pressure on the quarterback. They don't have a ton of sacks, but they create pressure, especially when James Pierce is healthy and he's able to cut loose. To me, that's the key to victory for Tennessee. Get the pressure up front, take the pressure off of the back end of the defense, going up against what is, I think, undoubtedly the best wide receiving group that they face all year. And and for Tennessee on defense, that's the way that they succeed. I don't think that they're going to have an issue with the running game, Mark. I really don't. They haven't all season long. It doesn't matter who they face. I think Georgia probably ran the ball the best against them, and they ended up just over 100 yards. Nothing crazy there. Ohio State surprisingly has struggled to run the football for most of the season. I don't think that they've, and I think Ohio State fans would agree that given the amount of hype that we put on Ohio State and the running game on Chip Kelly's offense with these two phenomenal running backs and Will Howard at quarterback, we just assumed that they would run the football better than they have to this point. I don't think it gets any better in this game. However, if they're able to get something established on the ground game, I like Will Howard and his experience over Nico Iamaleava. And, I think Nico's got a higher ceiling, and I think that's pretty obvious. I'm worried about him in this cold environment. This is going to be the coldest game he's ever played in. And I know people are trying not to make a big deal of the weather and things like that, but Nico's a guy who came from California. He didn't grow up in Tennessee, right? I know it's a 4 or 5 hour bus ride from Tennessee to Ohio State. There's not a ton of difference in the weather, few degrees. I get it, but this is Nico's not from that, and he hasn't played in something like this. When he goes to grip the football, it's going to be a little bit different. I do give the edge at quarterback to Will Howard. I just think that when I look at the playmakers on both sides of the football, I think Dylan Sampson is the best athlete on the field when he's on the field. And to me, I think that Sampson is going to be the reason that Tennessee wins this football game.
Let's look at some of the comments that we received this week. This was one of the most interesting comment sections of all the videos that we had did earlier this week, and I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on some of these because they were certainly interesting. From at Shroom SPLS, Shrooms, please. Okay, cool, man. Uh, Ryan Day's ego lost the Michigan game, not the scheme or talent on the field. And this person's responding to what we had talked about in that video. We had talked about Ohio State, obviously, in that Michigan game, taking the L there at home. He said he simply wanted to prove they could beat Michigan at their own brand of ball, and it backfired. And look, guys, I think there is a little bit of truth to that. Now, I'm not saying that Ohio State all of a sudden is going to get into the playoff and grow their wings, and all of a sudden they're the best offense in the country or anything. But I do think that there is a little bit of truth to that. Ryan Day has got a stubbornness to him, and there was an element in that game of, we're gonna cram it down their throat. We're the more physical team. We're not soft. Everybody's called us soft, and we ain't that way. Look what we're, and I'm sure Ryan Day, being a confident guy that he is, probably was telling recruits, "Watch this. We're about to bully their ass." And it didn't work out, right? It just didn't work out, and I think that there's a lot of outside noise for this Ohio State program, Mason. I think there's a ton of noise. There was a ton of money spent on this roster, and that's everybody's favorite talking point. This is the best team that money can buy, and they can't win a big game. And so I'm very interested to see how all that stuff. I feel like the pressure is on Ohio State here, and Tennessee is the team that hasn't been here a whole heck of a lot over the last few years. And yet I feel like all the pressure is on Ohio State and this coaching staff. And whenever the pressure was on Will Howard in that last game against Michigan, he didn't do very well with that, because I don't think that he's a quarterback that you're wanting to put the game on his shoulders. He's not that guy. He's a game manager who's meant to get the ball around to all the playmakers that are first, second, third round NFL talents on that offense, which is a lot of them at the skill positions. Um, so what I just thought that was interesting. At the bottom of this comment, it says it's going to be a great game, and I think either OSU blows them out or Tennessee wins a close one. Which I feel like there's a lot of different, there's a lot of territory in between there. But Tennessee is not in the habit of losing close, so if they're going down, it will be obvious early. Well, I mean, Tennessee lost what 17-14 or something to Arkansas this year, so I mean
Yeah.
they lost a close game. It was something like that to that effect.
Yeah.
Thought this was an interesting comment. Any thoughts on that, Mason?
Yeah, I think that he's onto something there with Ohio State trying to beat Michigan kind of at their own game. You got to remember when these coaches game plan and they start doing installs for the week heading into for a week heading into the game. There's kind of no going back. I mean, once you install that system and that play style for that specific week, I mean, you've got some opportunities for flexibility and whatnot. But I mean, if you practice those plays, you try to go outside of those plays, and you're going to see it on the field. You're not going to see the players be as sharp and whatnot. So, I mean, without no, I mean, I think it's all speculation, but I think you might be onto something as far as like a minor conspiracy in a sense that that Ryan Day was too
We'll
egotistical
we'll
in this
never
game. I
know.
mean,
We'll
yeah,
never know a definitive
it's
answer to
interesting.
this, right?
Yeah,
I mean, but it is interesting, and it's something that has crossed my mind because it did seem like there was some outside influence on the game plan. And you're right, Mason. Once you install something early in the week, I mean, that's your game plan. I mean, it's really really tough to change gears. You only get so much time with your guys. You only get so many practices and so many hours together. So. Um, that's an interesting thought. Moving on to the next comment here. Among many, there's a bunch of comments on this video. As you can see, that's the thumbnail from the video we did earlier this week. You can find that on our page. Go check it out. Go yell at these people in the comment section. You're more than welcome to do that. They put it out there. It's out in the public, so go for it. At Anthony Waldington 1173, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. It's obvious he doesn't know too much about the Ohio State receivers. I don't know which he was talking to, or just if our channel is a male, or what. But um, look, we all know about Ohio State and their receivers. I mean, I feel like that's the most obvious approach whenever you start talking about the Ohio State offense. But that hasn't really been the identity of this team this year. Those guys are awesome. Egbuka, Smith, all among others, Carnell Tate. Those guys have been awesome, no doubt about it. They're awesome players. They're going to be really good on Sundays as well. If we've learned anything about the wide receivers that come out of this program, it's a wide receiver factory. But the problem is the wide receivers won't be lining up at guard and tackle and center and blocking. And not to mention, if the wide receivers had it their way, every play would be called a passing play. And that's not what's going on in Ohio State right now, and that's not the identity of this team. Is it possible that Jeremiah Smith catches a couple of big touchdowns in this game and helps win the game for Ohio State? It is certainly possible. There is no
yeah,
doubt about that. And that is a factor in this game, and they're going to play a role in this football game. But if you're expecting Will Howard to go out here and have a C.J. Stroud-like performance like C.J. Stroud did against the Georgia Bulldogs, in the playoffs a couple years ago, everybody knows what I'm talking about, the Midnight Miracle. I just don't think he's that guy. So it's going to be more of a team approach. It's not going to be one man for this Ohio State offense or two wide receivers, or it's going. They're going to have to be able to establish some type of run game, and because if you're going to rely on long developing passing plays in this game over and over and over again, where to the point where it's predictable, Tennessee's got a pass rush that's going to be able to get to you, and it's going to be a problem eventually. What are your thoughts on this, Mason? You don't know anything about the Ohio State wide receivers. Did you look them up real quick?
Yeah, that's what I was doing while you were talking. Got a full scouting report. No, I mean, look, I follow the recruiting pretty closely. It's been tougher since we started this show, and since I've been kind of more dedicated to teams as a whole. I think my bandwidth has run thin a little bit, so I don't get as much into the recruiting like I used to. But make no doubt about it. I mean, I definitely recall some of these guys coming up and their the recruiting battles that took place and whatnot. I think the world of Jeremiah Smith. I think he is kind of the next
He's
um,
him.
Marvin Harrison. You know what I mean? I've got him a little bit ahead of Ryan Williams right now, and I think he's a little bit more put together right now as a receiver, a little bit more polished. Um, but yeah, I mean, look, this is
You don't
this
owe
is
an
somebody.
explanation for this comment, Mason. I mean,
Yeah,
this
this
is
is
silly.
somebody trying to cherry pick a thought here,
Yeah,
and I
I just
mean,
thought it was funny.
I think the Ohio, like I said, I mean, I just talked about how I think this is the best wide receiving group that Tennessee's faced all year. So, man, I definitely believe that it's the best receiving group almost everybody has faced all year whenever they face Ohio State, and
Yeah,
that's continuous.
we don't, and obviously that comment was from somebody that hasn't watched this channel a whole heck of a lot because we don't put on any colored tinted glasses on this show. I mean, we call it like we see it. Um, we haven't been afraid to pick against our own team on this show, and have done it successfully and have predicted it unsuccessfully. And anytime we're wrong, we're going to be right back on this channel. We don't give a damn. We ain't hiding like most of y'all do in the comment section. Whenever you're wrong, you disappear for a little bit. Um, Another comment that I thought was funny on this one. I hope Davy Crockett plants the Power T flag on the 50-yard line after the Vols win. Be careful with that. I
Golly,
don't know if they've.
woo!
Yeah, those are fighting words apparently, and apparently the coaching staff at Ohio State will just let them fight you over that. But with that being said, I don't know if all of y'all have heard, but there's been legislation introduced to make this some type of crime or I believe a felony. So. Tennessee boys, you better be careful. That them Ohio officers would love to arrest them some Tennessee boys.
Yeah.
If the legislation was passed that quickly, I doubt it. We all know how slow our government is and how shitty they are.
Well, I mean,
But
we know that they're not afraid to use pepper spray. So just know if you're going to run out there with with that flag, you're going to be getting maced. So just
oh
be
yeah,
prepared.
yeah,
Have your gas mask ready. Like that would be some shit. They go out there with gas mask and plant the flag and run off. That would be something.
yeah. If you're gonna plan it, you better plan it and run. That's all I got to say. Because apparently that is worth fighting over, which I disagree with. And here's kind of the final point on this one, and this is kind of the one I wanted to finish up on, Mason. And I have an interesting take on this, so I'm interested. We've already kind of heard your thoughts on this a little bit, but uh, Mia Khan won. Thanks for watching, Mia Khan. I appreciate it. Says it's cold everywhere, isn't it? Like, what sports-minded individual would think that weather is going to be a factor in this? If you can't play in the cold, go home and put a heated blanket on. Now, I like the fiery sentiment of this thought. Um, don't be a p word, right? Go get out there and do what you got to do. It is going to be very cold for this game in Columbus. There's no doubt about that. But for me to sit and think about this, uh, you know, does that play into Ohio State's favor? And I think that there's going to be, in some ways, maybe, but in some ways, maybe not. Mason, Ohio State has played almost exclusively noon games this year. They
Yeah.
haven't played night games in the cold. They don't practice out in the cold. Ohio State has some of the best facilities in this country. They're practicing indoors all the time, just like a bunch of the rest of these teams. And so, with that being said, I mean, I can't even remember the last time that Ohio State had a night game at the Shoe. And they're not going to be getting them. I mean, that's, um, with CBS and the way they're kind of infiltrated the Big Ten there. Um, you know, night games are going to be harder and harder to come by because every time you have a good game, they're going to snatch it up for noon kickoff or they're going to snatch it up for the CBS game of the week at 3:30. And that's the time slots that Ohio State has played at the majority of this season. I think it was 7 weekends in a row Ohio State had played at noon, something like that. So I don't think either team has an advantage with it being freezing cold. Both of these offenses are geared towards cold play, right? Run the football, get behind a big offensive line. I don't think there's a big advantage for either team here. They both have to play in the same weather. What are your thoughts on that? That's just my opinion. I mean, you're right with Nico, but I know that there's guys for Ohio State that aren't from Ohio. There's a bunch of dudes on that team that are from Florida, California. They're from all over the place. And they're
Yeah.
not necessarily, grandfathered into this cold weather climate or have a ton of experience playing in it. Although it was fairly cold whenever Ohio State hosted Michigan, but not as cold as it's going to be this coming up Saturday. I'm hearing it's going to be in the teens. What are your thoughts? And then we'll kind of close this
Yeah.
thing out and give our predictions on this one and move on.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jeremiah Smith, the guy that we don't know anything about, he's from South Florida. And I mean, he's not from Columbus. He's not used to this environment. It's probably the coldest game he's ever played into. So
Right.
if you want to compare playmakers, I think that's completely fair. Everybody's on the same field. We're not talking about Vikings versus Samoans. Like these are people that live in the continental U.S. for the most part, and I just don't think that there's going to be that much of a discrepancy in the level of gameplay between these two. I think it's going to be mostly mostly even and matched, and I think that the game is going to be evenly matched. I really feel like this. If Tennessee wins this game, it'll be Josh Heupel's greatest win of his career so far. Not just because it's a playoff game, but it's because it's Ohio State on the road. And I think a really good Ohio State team. I really like this defense a lot. I think it is potentially the best defense in the country, and has been one of the most consistent defenses in the country. When I look at a team like Georgia, I look at their defense, and we saw what they did on the road against Texas, and I think, well, that's a ceiling that not many teams can touch. Not many teams can match Georgia's ceiling as a defense, but Ohio State is almost there, and they do it consistently. And I think that's been the most impressive thing about this defense. But like I said earlier, I'm looking at the playmaker for Tennessee, which isn't Nico, and not this year at least. It's not Nico. It's Dylan Sampson, and I don't think that there is anyone on Ohio State's offense, and I know offense doesn't play offense. I get all that, but when I'm looking at the team's abilities to score points, assuming that these defenses are pretty similar, at least in their run defense, I like Sampson's ability to run the football more. I think this game stays low scoring. I like the underplay here, actually, a pretty good bit. Under 46.5 is the total there. And but I like Tennessee to win this game outright. I like Tennessee on the money line. I think it was around plus 250. Don't quote me on that, but I think there's really good value in that. And this is one that Tennessee could definitely get. On the flip side, if a team were to run away with it, I do think it would be Ohio State. But I like Tennessee in a close game here. I think that they learned a lot in the Arkansas loss, And you could say the same thing about Ohio State learning a lot in the Oregon loss, but I think Nico will have a better understanding of managing the clock. Whoever gets the ball last in this one wins, in my opinion. And if I'm going to have to pick a side, I'm gonna side with Tennessee on this one, because I mean we all love an underdog story, right? But give me Tennessee to win this one, and definitely cover the 7.5.
I think Ohio State's going to need some more of that special teams magic, right? I think they're going to need their defense to play well, and I think that they probably will. But I think Tennessee's defense is going to play well also in this game. I think this is a low scoring game, Mason. I told somebody earlier this week that it would not surprise me to see like a 17-10 outcome in this thing, like something crazy low, like Alabama LSU from the 2000s, earlier in the 2000s type game. Um, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that, especially if we see some other type of weather move in, right? Maybe some snow. That there is a possibility of that. So, if there is precipitation, I do think that the weather will have more of an effect on the game, obviously. So, but with that being said, I like everything you're saying there. I certainly like Tennessee plus the points here. I saw somebody in the comment section earlier put that they're taking Ohio State minus 6.5. Maybe they already had that bet, but I haven't seen that number anywhere. Y'all, all let us know in the comment section. What's your best bet on this game? Over, under, spread, all that stuff. Let us know what you think the score of this one is going to be. I'm taking Tennessee to win this thing. I think it's going to be a real close game. I could see 17-10. I could see 17-13. I could see 17-14. I mean, I think this thing is close, low scoring, and most of the time I'm siding with the home team. But again, I feel like Tennessee has got something to prove here. They're going to come in here with a chip on their shoulder, and I feel like Ohio State is going to play with a lot of pressure. And for that reason, I think Tennessee is able to hit a couple of big plays and stretch that Ohio State defense out a bit. So give me Tennessee. We're on the same page there.